talked specifically about companies. He talked specifically about Operation Breadbasket and our next speaker's role. He has since then and during then bring the movement that started in the South North and urbanized it and expanded it. I came out of that movement. He opened political doors. The downside that people don't give credit to is I've seen at Saturday morning meetings, as we do Saturday morning meetings here, that started in Chicago. He's had to preach while people stood in the audience with guns pointed at him. He ran for president with more threats than any candidate ever had, facing investigations of nothing, just trying to make something up to scar his name. Would go get Americans that were hostage and land at the airport and reporters asked, who paid the bill? But he is still here, and he is still with us, Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. That was great. Thank you. Now we go.
Al, let me alone. I want to express thanks to God for allowing our family to gather today to engage in meaningful discussion, reflection, and projection. Allowing us to gather the only place we could gather in a relevant African-American church. We do not take Pastor Waldron for granted, but we have faced too many locked doors and closed churches from our message, so when a pastor does open up to a meeting like this, don't take this pastor for granted. Pastor Waldron, please stand. I really want to thank God for this connection between this family of panelists today and Reverend Sharpton in a special way, because we must make something theologically clear about the ring of authenticity that you hear in Reverend Sharpton as a bit of connectivity. And when you hear Mrs. Abernathy speak, or Reverend Moss, or Reverend Vivian, there's something so genuine you have to listen, both the language and the message. The Bible says, remove not the ancient landmarks our mothers and fathers have set. When you separate from those landmarks, you are adrift without a sense of historical connection. One thing worse than not reading the scripture, to read it and to misinterpret it. Reverend Sharpton's strength coming out of Bishop Washington's church, yes. Reverend Bill Jones, and out of Breadbasket and SCLC, we see it commonly said today that this is now the Joshua generation. That's not true biblically. Joshua came out of Moses' army.
That's right.
Joshua helped to lead the wilderness movement between 60 and 08. That was the Joshua generation. This is the post-Joshua generation. Joshua came out of Moses' army. Right. Those who came out of Dr. King and the Abernathy's army, that's the Joshua generation. There's not a post-Joshua generation. Reverend Al spans the Joshua generation and the post-Joshua. That's why his consciousness would obligate him to put these two panels, because he stands between two generations. He is a connection. Am I making sense to y'all? Because Joshua knew Moses. Those who didn't know Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy can't be Joshua. Those who don't know C.K. Steele can't be Joshua. Those who didn't know Dr. King's father can't be the Joshua generation. This is the Joshua generation. This is the post-Joshua generation. And that connectivity is important. I am a bit perplexed today as I listen to these challenging statements. Dr. King in his last staff meeting, it's also a mistake. They keep referring to Dr. King's name solely. That is a huge mistake. Even he knew better. Dr. King said, when I go to the airport, I am a pilot. He said, but on the ground is the ground crew that gets the plane up and gets the plane down. He said, I cannot make it without a co-pilot. I can't fly through storms by myself. And so Ralph Abernathy is my co-pilot. And when I'm sleeping, my co-pilot flies for me. And our last staff meeting before going to Memphis, we received a call about midnight. Dr. Abernathy said Martin wants to meet with us in the morning at 10 o'clock at Ebenezer. Dr. King couldn't make that call. He didn't have the strength to make that call. Dr. Abernathy was our rock. He was our frame of reference. He was Dr. King's rock. And said, do come, whatever you're doing, come. I did not want to go to that meeting. I was doing a program, Breadbasket. Bevel was doing open housing. Bernard was doing something else. We were busy doing what we do. But come to the meeting. I remember getting to the airport at 7 o'clock, and Dr. Abernathy, I missed my plane. He said, I knew you were going to miss it. That's a 7:25 plane. So come to Atlanta. And Dr. Abernathy convened us. He said, Martin is coming in the study in a minute. He came in and sat down. And frankly, I am now where he was. I'm a bit perplexed about where we are today. Dr. King said, I've been with Ralph and his wife, Juanita, and Andy and Jean, and my wife, Coretta, for about 3 days. I've had a migraine headache. I don't quite know what to do. He said, I thought about quitting. Maybe I've done as much as I could do. We won Montgomery bus boycott. We have public accommodations. We have the right to vote. I'm now being attacked by my college classmates. I'm being attacked by ministers. I'm being attacked by the press. I've been attacked by the White House. Maybe I have done as much as I could do. Maybe I could just become president of Morehouse or begin to write books and give lectures. You say, but if I stop now, Sojourn the Truth and Frederick Douglass, those who never stop would not forgive me. I can't stop. And Andy Young said, Doc, don't talk that way about quitting. He said, Andy, be quiet. Don't say peace, peace when there is no peace. Let me finish talking. He said, then I thought maybe since our movement had become divided, there's Stokely and there's Rapp and there's Roy and there's Whitney and there's John, maybe we could, if I fast to the point of death, the leaders with whom there is disagreement on tactics, we're still friends, could come at my bedside at my point of death, and we could regroup our unity. He knew how good, how important, Mark, that was. And then as if a fresh breath of air blew, he said, we're going to turn a minus into a plus. We're going on to Memphis because garbage workers, they too, while they wear soiled uniforms, want to see their child graduate from college too. They too have dreams. Then we're going on to Washington. Maybe to Washington to engage in civil disobedience. Maybe tie up traffic and go to jail in Washington to shift from Vietnam War to the war on poverty at home. Those three stages were the same as Jesus. Let this cup pass from me. As he prayed, disciples slept. And not my will but thine be done. That was leading into Memphis. That meeting was convened by Dr. Abernathy. Others of us were disciples learning from, not quite appreciating what we're looking at until many of us had lost it. Today, Dr. King said on that also on that same day, My fear is we're moving to integration, but it may be integrating into a burning house. I am not as excited now, even though he talked about the mountaintop later on that week, about integrating into a burning house. This struggle ultimately is not just about direction, about complexion, it's about direction. We have a black on the Supreme Court now. Would you rather have the all-white male Warren Supreme Court or this diverse court? This diverse court may undermine Section 5. This diverse court might take away affirmative action. And so is it about diversity or is it about direction? Is it about color? Is it about direction? Which is a bit more complicated. That's why I'm a bit confused about this burning house. Many of our churches, we live in our faith, but we live under the law. And what made Dr. King and Ralph's movement significant was they changed the law, not just inspiration. We boycotted in 55, but won the law in 56. Mrs. Parks was no seamstress with bad feet sitting on the bus too tired to get up. She was a freedom fighter. Mrs. Parks taught literacy. She traveled the country with A. Philip Randolph and Josephine Baker. Mrs. Parks was no pitiful lady. She met with Fred Gray every day for a year to go to jail to challenge the 54 Supreme Court decision's validity. We won the boycott in 55, but we won the lawsuit in 56. She was not a woman with tired feet. She was tired of being oppressed, and she was a freedom fighter. I say that, Reverend Al, because if we buy into the title "pitiful lady stir," we think title "pitiful ladies" are freedom fighters, and they're not. My next point is that this is not just a 50-year celebration. That would be a huge mistake. After 246 years of slavery, headquartered on Wall Street, cotton picked in Alabama, processed and sold in New York, where the African burial ground is this morning, on which the Federal Plaza is built today. The slave market was New York, not Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia. The first state to abolish slavery was Vermont, because slavery peopled the whole coast. So after 246 years in slavery, abolition came 150 years ago. But we were enslaved longer than we have been free. Right. We were enslaved for 246, been free 246, 150, and then took that back. So we really been free since 65. We've been free 48 years. We've come from taxes without representation for 48 years. We've been free 48 years. We've gone from being hit in the mouth about trying to vote in 65 to the White House. We've gone from the balcony of Memphis to the balcony of the White House in 40 years. It's the wilderness years. And those who fought in the wilderness must have a role to play in determining the next stage, because that was Dr. King and Abner who laid the groundwork for the next stage of our struggle. At this point, today, the Harlem we once knew is on the way out. Harlem is where they sent us to when they took us away from Wall Street. We once lived on Wall Street. They put us across the trees now called Central Park. But we came up here as renters, not as owners. Now they're putting us out of Harlem. They're gentrifying Harlem. Harlem probably, there's a reasonable chance Harlem may not have a black successor to Charlie Rangel. In Detroit today, Reverend Al, you're part of this, the governor appointed a czar in 7 cities to replace democratically elected mayors. Sit down the mayor, sit down the council with the power to end labor contracts and sell off city assets. So a czar sold the Pontiac Stadium a $50 million building for $500,000 and began to work for the man who he sold it to. They took our democracy, and Justice Department is silent. You mean that they take away our vote? 53% of all blacks in Michigan today do not have an elected official that they can vote for at the local level. They took it away without a resistance. Today, we are free but not equal. We're number one in athletics. March Madness, May Sadness. March, we playing ball, May we're not graduating. March Madness, but May Sadness. There'll be a big ball game in Atlanta this weekend. There'll be a lot of madness, but come May, there'll be a lot of sadness. I'm perplexed. We're free but not equal. We're number one in politics, number one in infant mortality, number one in short life expectancy, number one in unemployment, number one in home foreclosures, number one in church foreclosures. They're closing schools and hospitals and transportation. They said as opposed to equal access to education for all of us, charter schools for some of us. Now what does that mean? Well, when they get in these semi-privates, they really learn well. Well, surely Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego could learn well under good conditions, but the issue is not could Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego learn. The issue is what about the rest of them? The most blessed could always make it. Lastly, there's something called today in Chicago. Reverend, there are no gun shops in Chicago. There are no gun ranges in Chicago. Why are we the number one killing machine? Guns are manufactured in the suburbs. Guns in. Drugs come across the border. Drugs in. Guns in. Drugs in, jobs out because of trade policy, and homes taken. Jobs out, guns in, drugs in, homes taken. There is no urban policy for reconstruction. There's a plan to destroy, but there is no plan for what was the plan for reconstructing Europe? Something called Marshall Plan, 50-year loans. At 2% government secured. We need a reconstruction bank with $2.5 million of money offshore and $2.5 million in Wall Street banks. We need a long-term, low-interest development bank to build where we live. I close on this note, Al, it burns my soul. With all of my babies dying, we seem to have adjusted. One thing worse than slavery is to adjust to it. Al, in most southern states, the number of blacks in jail is bigger than the number margin of the governor's campaign. More of us have lost the right to vote than have the vote to elect a governor or senator. That's a discussion. There are two Wall Street companies that own all of the prison telephone systems. They make $1.5 billion a year off of prison telephones. A call from Utah, a call coming from New York. He has a brother in jail in Utah. It costs his mother $15 a minute to receive the call. In Chicago, they make $3 million a year off of prison telephone calls. They make 600 products, from Victoria's Secrets to making car parts, in the prisons in Illinois. There's some kids been in jail 5 years on pretrial detention. They've not been charged. Jail is a hotel. Jail is a hotel. Jail is a housing complex for them. And so I'm perplexed because I think we have a false sense of joy. I think that we are on a rudderless boat. There was a game not years ago when the Jets played the Cleveland Browns. And they said if the Jets on the 4th down got 5 yards, they would keep the ball and could get maybe a field goal. The Jets got 3 yards, so technically they lost the ball with 30 seconds to go, so Cleveland gets the ball, they could run their clock out. But the Cleveland Browns safety man, in his excitement, took his helmet off and threw it in the air. We got him. Referee blew the whistle. You can't take your helmet off before the game is over. And so he was penalized 15 yards. Jets kept the ball, kicked the field goal and won the game. The moral of that is that you can't shout before the game is over.
Reverend Jesse Jackson. Melanie Campbell, you've been in the trenches. You've heard from our legends. We want to hear from you, Melanie Campbell.
You know you're my friend, right? I thought you were my friend till just now. How do you come behind that? How do you come behind that? Reverend, thank you for giving us a teaching moment.
Yeah.
For giving us a history lesson in real time. Thank you, our elders who have not left the battlefield, Michael, who have challenged us that we need more prophetic voices, Michael, Blake, to stand with the faith leaders, to stand with the civil rights leaders. I want the sisters to stand up for a moment. I need your help. So the first thing I want to ask you, are you ready for the fight? So, brothers, stand up. Are you ready to stand with the sisters in leadership? Are you ready for the fight? So sisters and brothers, stand up. And they say, stand up, you mighty race. We know what we need to do. We in this house, Reverend Michael, Brother Mark, all of us, they done told us what we need to do. Now we've elected our president for a second term. We somehow slipped and let, it ain't our fault, but you know, hey, we got a crazy Congress over there. But we got sisters like Marsha Fudge who don't mind standing up and speaking and challenging the president, challenging the Congress. We just left with the Black Women's Roundtable. Sit down, I'm so sorry. I used to be married to a Baptist preacher. For those who know me from Mims, Florida, you know, I just can't help it. But we just left a couple weeks ago, Reverend, with our Black Women's Roundtable, Women of Power Summit. Because black women, if we don't turn out, the black vote is not there. So what we know we did last year is we connected with the brothers, because when they talked about the voter ID law, it was our brothers who were going to be mostly impacted about that law. So we partnered up and built not just, I remember last year this time, Reverend, when we were here, when you had Trayvon Martin's parents here, you had Amadou Diallo's mother here, you had Brother Sean Bell's fiance here, and part of the movement that's the now was that you took that fight, you led it, our other civil rights leaders, and you took it to the streets. You can be in the suites, and that's nice, and we can be in all the fancy clothes, but we have to take it to the streets. The Tea Party game that's going on, we can't let them, but they're talking about austerity. Y'all know what austerity is now? I had to go back and look it up a second time. Austerity, they're talking about sequestration. We best know what they're talking about. Because right now they're talking about cutting this budget on the backs of poor folks, on the back of our children's future, and now is the time for us to rise up, our mighty people, and fight. Give the president some pushback. He can't do it by himself. Push him. We want to see some more black folks appointed. Now is the time for us as a mighty people to stand up. They done told us they still fighting. They should be able to go sit on the beach in Miami. But they're still fighting. So when we talk about unifying, I spend my days, Mark knows, we work hard together trying to take it from words to deeds. But we can't stand up, you know, if we go to the White House, yeah. But it means nothing if this room doesn't multiply itself in the streets now. That's all I need to say.
We have about 45 minutes left on the air, so we're going to hear from the last two. I want to hear a plan from Mark and Rosalind and Tamika, and then I'm going to do the last 30 minutes with some of you in the audience, obviously not all of you, that can ask a question of someone on either side, and it is a question, not a statement, not a sermon, a question. So I want the guardians to get to the mics, so when I ask for 4 or 5 at a time, and I want to do the last half hour there, don't move yet, but I want the guardians to get there, because I know somebody going to act up. And I'm going to have people there to sit you down, because I come out of the acting up tribe. I know how we act up. Young lady who is 15 years old, heads our youth department nationally. I met her, she works in our Atlanta office. She called me on the radio when she was 9 and said, we have to do something about violence. At 11, she formed her own youth group, then she merged into National Action Network. She has chapters all over the country. Mary Pat Hector. And before you speak, Mary, we are joined now by the Dean of the Civil Rights Movement, Reverend Joseph Lowry. Mayor Pat.
Yes, Reverend Sharpton. One, you know, a lot of people can see why I have women like Mrs. Melanie Campbell and Tamika Mallory in my life after that beautiful piece by Mrs. Campbell. But one thing that National Action Network's Youth Move is really working on is the violence in the community and the guns. This is an issue that is truly not just affecting us as a people, but affecting people from all different races, colors, and cultures. And we need to really let people understand that a stray bullet doesn't have a name or an age. And it really does not only just affect that person, but it affects generations and it affects families. One thing that National Action Network's Youth is doing is creating the 10% of young people that are going to lead 90% of the world tomorrow. That is what National Action Network's Youth Move is doing. We have really worked with organizations such as Black Youth Vote, with Mrs. Melanie Campbell, getting people registered to vote, because that is one thing that is really important. National Action Network's Youth Move and National Action Network's Atlanta chapters did adopt schools to educate our young people in high schools and colleges, on the candidates that were running for president, and not just president, but other elections going on in the city of Atlanta, letting them know that this is something that really does affect you and it really is important and you need to get to the polls and vote. There was no excuse because we had vans and we had cars taking people to get their IDs and taking them to the polls to get ready to vote in those long lines. National Action Network's Youth Move is also working on education. We have talked to Marcus Bright and Dominique Sharpton, working with them on the Education for a Better America. I know that Reverend Jesse Jackson was just talking about the schools closing. We are really hurt by that. But we are going to ask, well, what is the plan and how can National Action Network and National Action Network's Youth Move help with that plan, and what can we do? Because we understand that it was the youth who was the foot soldiers with C.T. Vivian and Reverend Joseph Lowry. It was the young people with the Arkansas 9, the St. Augustine 6, and the hundreds of kids that died and rioted to end apartheid. And a lot of people in the media and news say that we are not ready, but that is not true. Our young people have been discouraged, and we need to encourage them and motivate them because we are ready. And that's all I really have to say, Reverend Sharpton.
Mayor Pat Hector, challenge of the black church. No one can address where we are today in the black church and where we need to move forward than our own head of our ministers division and pastor of this church, Reverend Michael Walra.
Thank you, Thank you, Reverend Sharpton. I have to first say I am deeply humbled by what I have listened to and heard, and as was said by, I believe, Melanie, this was a teachable moment. It is something that ought to happen more frequently in our communities, where we sit at the feet of those who have endured and survived and begin to glean. And I was sitting here containing myself, listening to Mrs. Abernathy, who set me on fire listening to that. And I want to many things I would want to say, but I really just want to respond to the issues she raised and many of the other clergy about this post-Joshua generation of clergy. I once read somewhere that a nation that makes a distinction between its scholars and its warriors will have cowards that make laws and fools who fight wars. Likewise, I would want to say that churches, when we make distinctions between pastors and warriors, we will have preachers that can be purchased, and we will have preaching that has no power. One of the things that Reverend Vivian said is that Martin King brought strategy, and a new strategy. And part of the issue, I think, is that much of the possibilities for new strategy have been minimized in this particular generation, my generation, because there's a lack of prophetic imagination that ignites, I think, the possibilities of social transformation. Now, part of the reason I think there's a lack of prophetic imagination is because for many clergy in my generation, there is a dysfunctional preoccupation with the trappings of success and not really with the idea of edifying the institution that has undergirded so much of the community. And there's also a dizzying intoxication with wanting affirmation from the structures that reinforce oppression. Now, there is no way that you can be part of any justice struggle when you are seeking validation from those who maintain the systems that enforce poverty, poor schools, prison industrial complex. If you look for validation in those structures, you will always be wanting and in need of really some real deliverance, I think, in many ways. But the lack of prophetic imagination has to do in our current generation with regard to the church because of a few things. One, I think there has been the abolition of the passion for the possible. In other words, we have lost hope. When you hear, Reverend Moss and Miss Abernathy and Reverend Vivian and Reverend Jackson speak, the only thing that enabled them to endure was a hope that transcended the reality of what they were dealing with and a belief in what was possible in spite of the affliction they suffered. When you lose a passion, when you lose a passion for what is possible, you resign yourself to being manipulated by forces that do not have your best interests in mind. Secondly, I think that there has to be an undying commitment to igniting the creative forces in our communities. One of the reasons why we seem helpless in our communities and in our churches to confront many of the current crises we face is because there's a lack of creativity. You have to be able to set yourself in this current cultural context and develop strategies that speak to the moment, not just to ideas that really are reduced to sound bites, but creative ideas that are steeped in collaboration, because part of the problem in our churches is that we are so territorial and that we are so consumed with who gets top billing on the program that we've forgotten about how to come together and collaborate. And in the midst of collaboration, we lack something that was done in this generation, which is one, mobilize, that has almost become a curse word in our culture, and two, they believed in what they were doing. Lastly, I think there has to be, and I say this all the time here at FCBC, a deep hunger for healing that goes beyond building a church. You see, because part of the issue, I think, is that we are so focused on our ecclesiastical development and making sure that our churches have a location. I want to make a distinction, because there's a distinction between location and presence. Many of our churches are located but have no presence, which means that they are not really having the kind of impact in communities that lends itself to transcendent possibilities, to counter the cultural insanity we see every day. Now, the only way that's going to happen, I'm really done, but the only way that is going to happen is if our churches begin, one, to collaborate, two, the collaboration cannot be event-oriented. I've heard you say this, Reverend Sharpton. It cannot be event-oriented, because when it becomes event-oriented, when you reduce your struggle to events, that means then that your goal is sound bites, media hits, and flashing cameras. But when you transcend events, and really have in mind the idea of coming together for sustained engagement. You need to hear that. Sustained engagement. Because many people will show up for the one rally, but never show up the next day for the groundwork that it takes to really participate in the transformative work in our community. And then lastly, for those of my colleagues who do this, one of the classic definitions of preaching by Phyllis Brooks was that preaching is truth through personality. That it is the truth of the gospel through the personality of the proclaimer. The problem is the proclaimers have always been flawed. That's what makes the gospel so powerful. But we have not been dysfunctionally flawed in the past. That means then that the flaws have now become insecurities that minimize the opportunity for us to participate in the kind of work that will help transform our communities. In other words, our insecurities become excuses from us putting our hand to the plow and not looking back. Thank you.
We're going to take 2 minutes, and I mean 2 minutes, from Mark Morial, Rosalind Brock, and Tamika Mowry to give us 3 points the organization is going to work on and commit to in this year coming. Then we go on to the audience. But before we do that, there is a passage in the Bible, Reverend Scott, where Moses sent Caleb and a crew out. to survey the promised land. When the crew came back, most of them said that we cannot take the land. And he said, why? He said, because we saw those that inhabit the land.
Yeah.
And to us, they seemed as giants, and we seemed as grasshoppers. They were not giants, and the Israelites were not grasshoppers, but that is how they seemed to be. But there was the objection by Caleb and his young associate Joshua that said, no, we can take the land. Years later, when Joshua had taken the land, he looked back at Caleb, who was now an old man, and said to Caleb at 84 years old, you believed, and you saw that we could come here. Where do you want to lay? Do you want the easy valley and the plains? Caleb said, no, give me the mountain.
Yeah.
Why? Because the same young Caleb that believed in the promised land didn't want an easy way out once he got to the promised land. I saw that in real life when we stood there in January of 2009 and President-elect Barack Obama called on the Caleb of the movement to have the last word in his inauguration. The man that believed it in his youth and lived to see us approach the mountaintop, Reverend Joseph Lowry.
Thank you very much. I don't know what you said, I don't hear too well. So whatever I say comes from another source.
All right.
I'm first of all, let me say this. Al Sharpton has brought a new dimension to the movement. One of the problems we had all through the movement was getting the word out, communication. And now this fool is doing the communicating. I turn on the 6 o'clock news and I expect to hear them say what we done. And here we there telling it ourselves. And I have to give credit for that. When they asked me to do the benediction at the inauguration, some of my friends called and said, we want you to do the invocation. I said, but it's not your call. President wants me to do the benediction. It's all right with me because as I think about it, I'll have the last word. You see, nothing came after me but the Star Spangled. I've never liked the Star Spangled Banner. You're talking about bombs bursting in the air and that kind of thing. But that day, even the Star Spangled Banner sounded good to me. The president called me before the inauguration and said, he called me on my cell phone he had some kind of funny cell phone that I called him back on, and he answered. I said, I want to speak to the man who's going to be the 44th president of the United States. And he said, that would be me, Brother Lowry. I want to ask you, would you do the benediction at the inauguration? And I said, let me check my calendar. I'm not just sitting around here waiting on you to call me. I've been in touch with Moss and Jesse, and we got things to do, right? I said, and then I thought, he might take me serious. I said, but I checked the calendar and I'm clear. And somebody told me, he said, when you get up on the steeps, the Capitol, you look down the mall, you can see the Lincoln Memorial on one hand and the Washington Monument on the other. And on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial is a place where, 40-some years ago, a young Baptist preacher stood there and called America to a new level of spirituality. I'm tired of you wallowing in the dust and dirt of race and color. I want you to come up to higher ground. I want you to come up to the issue of what did he say? I want you to come. I tell you, when you get my age, two things happen to you, Al. One, you forget things. And two. They said when you get up there, you'll see the Lincoln Memorial and you see the Washington Monument. And when I got up there, and they called on me to give the benediction, I felt pretty good. I had never been up there before. And I looked to see if I could see the Lincoln Memorial and the Washington Monument. I couldn't hardly, my eyes. At that time, they were about 88 years old. We're 91 now. If I live to October, I'll be 92. So I couldn't make out the monument and the Lincoln Memorial. But I heard, as I stood, I heard the voice of a young Baptist preacher summoning America. Come up out of the lowland of race and color to the higher ground of content of character. And there I was standing on the Capitol steps where just a few years before I stood before George Wallace with the petition of the Selma to Montgomery March. He slammed the door in our face. But God opened another door. And he had a young man walk in. But I heard Martin's voice saying, deal with character and not color. Deal with integrity, not race. And we come here today. God is calling us. I'm so proud of what you're doing. I don't know if I'll ever be back here again. I don't know how long to be. But whatever time it is, I'm ready. I'm not. I thought about what Martin said. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory. And I tell you, sit down, I'm not through. When you get 91, you can take some privileges. Nothing they can do about it. You can't say I ain't going to invite you next time, because I may be in heaven when you meet next time. It make any difference. But I just come to, I'm proud to be here to see us together. The thing they want from us is for us not to be together. But we have learned that there's no sense in turning on each other. We got to turn to each other. And I thank you, Brother Al, for what you're doing. I just want one final thing. We've got to understand that God is sending us a message. I don't know what clearer message God can send than here's a Negro who hadn't been in the Senate long enough to spell senator. And here he was running for the presidency. And Jesse said to me, he said, Joe, you didn't do a hell of a lot to help me. I said, I did all I could. God picked you to run to pave the way. We knew you weren't going to win. Wouldn't have done for you to win. You weren't ready. But God had a man waiting in the bush. And he called this young man, and somebody said, I told Sharpton, I said, I'm going to support him. And Sharpton said he hadn't made up his mind yet. So my mind made up. God has a plan. He's trying to send us a message. It's time for us to get together. What better messenger than the President of the United States? He won't be white, he won't be Greek, he won't be Italian, he won't be German, he gonna be one of us. And some of us didn't want to believe that. You know, Juanita wasn't sure. Later on, she felt good about it, but somehow God sent me a message. Get out there. See, I'm serious about this Negro. And I went to Selma, and he made a speech about, what was it, Otis? Joshua generation. And he looked back at me and John Lewis, and he said, you all are the Moses generation. You've done a good job. But we are the Joshua generation. And our job is to complete the task that you and Martin and Ralph and others started. We're going to complete the task. And I said to myself, that's my candidate right there. It's clear. And I was trying to tell, what's that boy's name in Princeton? What's his name? Fellow at Princeton. Yeah, Cornell West. He's a good boy. But he has to understand that God moves in mysterious ways. His wonders to perform. Plants his footsteps on the sea and rides upon the storm. And he picked this young man to put him up there. Nobody believed it. I went to Iowa after we left Selma. Incidentally, I'll tell you this and I'll be through. Everywhere I went on a college campus that year and meet with the students and the faculty, they would always ask me questions. That year I asked them questions. What do y'all see in Obama? You know what the white women says? He's sexy. Sexy. So I was marching across the bridge, and John Lewis and then went down that end with Hillary. And I walked up this end with Barack. My wife was there. I said, Dad, I want to ask you a question. I said, do you think Barack is sexy? And I listened very carefully to her answer. And she said, no comment. I'm coming home now, Al. But I won't be here next year. I got other plans. But I want you to hear me. God is sending us a message. What better message can he send us than to put a man in charge? All the white fellas, they take orders from Barack. I didn't think I'd ever live to see it, but I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did. And God, this is a new day for us. We have no business acting like we used to. God is calling for a new Negro to match the new leadership that he's given the world. Well, I don't know about you, but the leader of the free world is a black man. If that doesn't make you become a new person, something wrong with you. If you're still acting like you used to act when you got a new leader of the free world, something wrong with you. You've got to stop turning on each other and turn to each other. Got to stop. We've got to stop finding fault with each other. We've got to stop thinking Al versus Jesse versus Otis versus What's the Urban League boy name? We haven't got time to be against each other. God is expecting us to follow the new leadership. And I know he can't do everything at one time. My God. I don't know what Cornell and what's the other boy's name? With the radio program. Tavis. A Negro named Tavis. But anyway, don't waste your time fighting them. We got to turn to the agenda. Measure our movement in terms of how we respond to the new leadership. If God can't reach us through a black president, what in the hell will it take to reach us? Huh? What you need? What you want? My God, what else can we have than a new black president? And not only did he get elected, he got re-elected. They wanted to call the first time a fluke. But the second time wasn't no fluke, baby. They re-elected. God bless you, Al Sharpton. Bless you for what you're doing. God had to make a new creature out of you too. You look different.